Alright, so for today's video, we're going to be talking about the budget decks you should be picking up for the next format. If you don't want to spend a ton of money, there's a lot of viable decks that you can play right now. Obviously, we are in a very diverse format, and the ban list did impact the format quite a lot because Shtira sort of went out of the meta, at least for the time being, so it stopped gatekeeping a lot of decks, and there are going to be some changes. And today we're going to be talking about some fairly cheap decks that you can pick up that's around $100 or something like that, where you only need to spend for a couple cards that are a tiny bit more expensive, but then you get a very decent deck that you know is not going to be hit for some time, at least a couple months. There are many more decks out there is what I want to emphasize before we get started, so please let me know if there are any options that I didn't list here that you feel like are going to be very viable. And yeah, of course, like the video if you like me doing these types of videos on the topic of budget. So still a tiny bit sick, but I am getting better. So yeah, basically for the first deck, it will be kind of a crime if we don't talk about Flunder, since it did win its first YCS, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think Flunder actually won a YCS up until now. I might be wrong, please correct me if I am, but I think I'm not. I think Flunder actually won for the first time. And essentially why Flunder is going to be really good right now is because it has a great Unchained matchup. And Unchained also being fairly accessible, although I didn't include it in today's list, mainly because Abomination's Prison is like kind of going wild in price. So until we get a reprint of that, Unchained is not the most accessible deck out there, but it is the best one, at least in the opinion of a lot of players. So it's going to see a lot of representation, and Flunder is going to be able to compete with the deck very well. You are you are totally focused on normal summoning your monsters. You have nothing to do with special summoning. So some of the Unchained effects are not going to hurt you at all. And also just being able to put up the board that you put up with, Empen and Ryza, the trap card map also for an additional type of disruption and play and all of that. And of course the hated trap card, the Harpy's Feather Storm. It is what it is. Flunder is still going to be around. It is insanely annoying, not to mention that it plays Shifter, but it's also very, very budget. Now, the Flunderese Adventure used to be around 15-16 euros, but now with the reprint in the Megatins, which is around like €1 or something like that, Flunder is even more accessible. So before that, if people didn't want to get it because one card was a little more expensive, now everyone's gonna get it if they feel like they want to counter the meta, which some players like to do. So yeah, get ready for Flunder. But if you want to counter Unchained specifically and just have a fairly decent matchup against other things, I think you have to play this deck. And of course, if you want to get it, it's very, very cheap. The only thing to maybe mention is that Droll can make a comeback in the meta. It is not completely out of it, especially if Flunder sees more play. It is consistently going to be in people's side decks, and then it's going to be a little easier for us to compete with Flunder if you're not playing Flunder. But still, if you get it, you're not going to spend that much on a core that you would feel bad or feel like you are negging. You're most definitely not. And also, a couple Drolls here and there are probably not going to hurt you to the point where you wouldn't have a decent score at an event, I think. Flunder is one of these decks that gets a lot of hate, and I personally don't really like it, but I understand that it is not completely a skill-less deck. I think that's sort of like a bad reputation that it gets, but it takes a good pilot to play Flunder properly, I think. So if you really want to, hone your skills with that deck, you can get it for cheap and you can compete with the meta. So moving on to other decks, the next one is Salamangreat. Just a very, very decent contender because it has space to play a ton of non-engine. Gazao is now at 3, and the new support is insanely good for that deck. Just a better Lady Debug, a really nice effect when it comes to Weasel, and also being able to go for the Link 4 and get another card. I know it's a Link 4, but you don't struggle that hard to get to it. And if you play Hitso, you get to draw a ton, and then you have your disruptions in the form of non-engine that you set, maybe a book card, an impermanence, something like that, or your in-engine trap cards, and you also have a lot of hand traps, so you're able to most definitely survive and then very, very easily OTK. So the Salamangreat of Fire is around 20 euros or something. People realize that, coming from a side set, it is not going to receive a reprint anytime soon. Obviously, it went up in price also due to it being printed over there, and Of course, Gazelle went to 3. So some of us that still have the cores are quite excited to, you know, to be able to maybe play this deck if we want. It is a cool deck. And of course, if you already own a core, you would only need to spend for the support and I guess for access code, which you may already own from before as well. So if you don't, you're only spending around 30 euros for an access code and then about 20 per copy of the Salamangreat of Fire. And then the Raging Phoenix, which would be around 100 euros. And if you actually have to get the core, it's a little more, but it's not that much. But it's also a very decent contender that's definitely not exposed to being hit anytime soon. And if you want to, I guess, play a good mid-range deck that's going to also teach you a lot about sort of like dealing with your resources and having them at all times and not wasting them, I think Salamangreat is the deck for you. It took a lot of skill to pilot it back then, and now there are more lines even to do, and I guess, yeah, it's a cool deck. It's a cool deck, and if you want to invest into it, I completely support you. Now, moving on to another deck, we are still going to be talking about dragons. I still think they are good. Like, of course they lost Magnamut and they lost Chaos Space, but not completely, neither of them. And still you can just replace these with some other cards or non-engine and just go from there. You know, Dragons is always going to be able to put up at least 1 or 2 disruptions on almost any given hand. And of course the consistency is lower now because of the lack of a couple copies of Magnamut and Chaos Space, but still with the Megaton reprints, Bestios went down in price, and if you actually look at the original printings, almost all of them are cheaper than the new reprint. Druisworm specifically is going up, so keep an eye out for that. Please get a playset as soon as possible because Druisworm is also going to be very good in the Unchained matchup. Some people are already citing 3 copies, and you may also play like a copy of Magnamut and 3 of Druisworm if you want. But if you're playing dragons, you have all of that in your main deck, and you might actually play like multiple copies of Druisworm now, which you not just might, you probably will, because of the lack of Magnamut and also the Unchained matchup. So yeah, get those as soon as possible because overall Bestios are very cheap right now. If you get, you know, a playset of each of them, I don't think you're spending that much, and that's including Lubelion. And then you have this engine that's just probably not going to be hit because Magnamut already went to 1. You know, they're hand traps and they are engine in the dragon deck that has always been quite cheap, but because the Bestios were expensive, specifically Lubelion, some people just didn't want to pick it up because Lubelion was very expensive. But now it's around 10 euros or something like that. I think it is actually going down. It's around 8 right now, last time I checked, which was literally a couple minutes before making this video. So you know, yeah, you're not spending that much, and you are playing a deck that's like quite hard to pilot, so you are going to be learning a lot. You can just take it into different routes is what I really like, and I always talk about that. It can be either mid-range, either just hardcore combo, or you're just chilling on a couple disruptions and hand traps in the hand. And like, yeah, I really like this about dragons. They are still viable 100%, and if you want, that's the deck you can pick up. And for the next one, we're going to be talking about Labyrinth. You know, the only thing I have to say about that is that it did not get hit on the ban list. Nothing got hit, not even Eradicator or a Floodgate or the barrier or something that doesn't even have to do with Labyrinth. Nothing got hit, and the deck is still at full power, and it's good. You know, it can be played just pure with just your standard furniture stuff. Chaos Angel is expensive, I get that, but now with the reprints, the rest of the Labyrinth deck is cheap, so the only thing you're spending for is Chaos Angel, which isn't that bad because it's a good extra deck monster. So if you want to go for that like version, you can do that, but you can also play just very not hand trap, sorry, trap card heavy, and you're not spending practically anything for the Labyrinth engine, everything being around 1 to 2 euros. And the big welcome, yes, the big welcome is there. It is around 20-30 almost euros at this point. It's going up because it came from Photon Hybernova, which did not receive a reprint. If you just got the cards beforehand, you are not spending a lot right now to get the rest of the core now that it is reprinted. Another thing you can do is you can play it with Unchained if you want. There are also versions out there, and that way you can play a very strong deck in the meta. Yeah, you know, Labyrinth is a good contender, has all of these trap cards at its disposal, including the unhealthy ones that I already mentioned, and it's able to do all of these synchro plays if you want. It's just really nice, and since it doesn't cost that much right now, if you exclude the Big Welcome Labyrinth, that's pretty much the only thing you have to get, plus the Chaos Angel if you want to play that version. You're also not going to be spending that much money. So yeah, this is the next deck if you're sort of in the mood to play more of a control-ish type deck. And for the last deck on the list, you can play any kind of Sprite Runic variant. Runic cards obviously got reprinted. We need to talk about this. And yeah, it is great that they are that accessible right now, especially because they didn't get hit. So as much as this is not, amazing in my eyes specifically, because I don't really like the Runic engine that much, I think it's fairly toxic, being able to just take resources away from your opponent. Specifically a card like Tip, for example, is just kind of stupid, but everything is still legal and it is also cheap. And since Sprite stuff has always been cheap, then you only have to add the Life Twin stuff or For Hire, which is also not expensive. And then we come to Sprite Blue. Yes, of course, we had to talk about this. Power of the Element not receiving reprints in the Megatins is very unfortunate. And now Sprite Blue is around like almost twice its price. Not yet, but it is going up. And you might want to get them as soon as possible, but they might also give Sprite Blue a reprint. We don't know what's going to happen. So if you want, you can just get pretty much everything except for Sprite Blue if there is not an event coming up, or if you want, you can just get the Sprite Blue as well, because it's literally the only thing you're spending a little more money on. So you are still, under the 100 or 150 euro, I guess, threshold of what you want to spend for a deck. And also the Sprite Sprint, which is around 10, but you're only usually playing one copy. So yeah, it is not that bad. And also, just speaking of what the deck is able to, I guess, accomplish, you still need to play non-engine, so Runic decks are not ideal in the meta, but they act as pseudo non-engine. And what the Sprite side of things puts up, and also For Hire, for example, is really decent. You still have a lot of disruptions, and you can play 1 to 2 play sets of other cards as well. So I'm pretty sure that if you play cards that are quite high impact, like Nibiru, for example, and then another playset, and then you pretty much have your entire Sprite Runic For Hire package or Life Twin package, I think you should be good. It's a deck that you have to play well, but it is also quite rewarding if you're able to do so. So yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to our budget decks. But like I said, there are many others that you're able to play. So please let me know which decks you like in the meta right now and what you would suggest to people. And if you like the video, of course, like it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.